Live from London, this is BBC News. Underwater noises are detected in the search for a missing submersible sent to view the Titanic. The Coast Guard says the sounds are now a focus of that search.
The sonar buoys detected noise in the water. We don't know the source of that noise, but we've shared that information with Navy experts to classify it.
President Zelensky admits the counter-offensive against Russia has been slower than desired as world leaders gather to discuss rebuilding Ukraine. Attacks on Palestinian villages after 4 Israelis, including a teenage boy, were shot dead in an attack near a settlement in the occupied West Bank will be live in Israel. And the world's largest greenfield music festival gets underway as the gates open at Glastonbury. Hello everyone, I'm Marianne Mashiri. You're watching BBC News Now. Welcome to the programme. Search teams trying to find the submersible that's missing near the wreck of the Titanic have detected underwater noises. The US Coast Guard says a Canadian aircraft picked up sounds, according to one report. There was a banging noise at about 30-minute intervals. But searches so far have produced no results. Those on board, 3 of them British, have only a day's supply of oxygen left. Well, Richard Galpin now reports.
These are the last known pictures of the Titan submersible before contact was lost, an hour and 40 minutes after the crew began the descent. An American Coast Guard cutter and other boats have arrived in the area now to help with the search. Experts say the crew have approximately until later tomorrow before the air in the submersible runs out. The US Coast Guard boss is John Morger.
It's a target, it's a focus for us to look at. And so we've deployed the remote operated vehicles and the surface vessel, the Canadian Coast Guard surface vessel that has sonar capability in the vicinity of that to see if we can detect anything in the water in that area.
But there is now a ray of hope. A Canadian military plane flying over the area with a sonar has picked up sounds of banging. But for all those on board the submersible, there remains the concern about their air supply.
The best thing they can do is just conserve their breathing. Every breath that they take consumes oxygen, and that's their limiting factor. So they need to minimize the oxygen they breathe in, the carbon dioxide they breathe out. They could be sleeping, they could take some sleeping medicine, but the best thing to do is just to rest and continue to bang on the wall and hopefully bang out SOS and Morse code or something like that, so we know that it's actually coming from humans and not just maybe a submarine in the area or something like that.
On top of this is concern why the team started this dive so early in the season.
When you're out in the North Atlantic, it is, we only have a 3-month weather window, which pretty much goes from, the end of June to September, where the seas are calm enough to actually be out there and able to dive, which right now it's really early in the season. So I'm not sure, why Oceangate went out this soon.
The immediate task now is to locate the submersible, but then comes the crucial job of retrieving it. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
Well, let's take you to the live pictures that are coming into us of the scene at Newfoundland, which is, of course, from where a lot of the rescue operations have been moving. Just a few lines that we've had in the last few hours. It looks like experts, apparently in 2018, from the Marine Technology Society, wrote to the boss of Oceangate, which owns the Titan, expressing unanimous concern about the Titan. This is the letter that's been unearthed by the New York Times. And the authors of the letter warned of potentially catastrophic issues with the design of the Titan. They also said Oceangate was making misleading claims about its design exceeding industry safety standards. Well, the New York Times has said that Oceangate has declined to comment on this letter. Well, that and much more on this story, as always, on our live page if you're stepping away from the TV. But if you're not, and I hope you're not, we were a little bit earlier watching what our partners in the US were doing, and they did quite an important interview with a key player in the rescue operation. That's Rear Admiral John Morger of the US Coast Guard. Let's listen.
This continues to be a really complex case with both a surface search and a subsea search. And our thoughts are with both the crew members and the families. I know that this is an incredibly difficult time for the family. And so we're working very hard as part of an international effort, as part of a unified command with the U.S. Navy, with the Canadian Armed Forces, Canadian Coast Guard, and private enterprise to bring as many assets to bear, as many capabilities to bear at the search site to conduct both a thorough air, surface, and subsea surface search.
Yeah, we know you guys have all the best people in the business working on this 24/7. Do you remain optimistic at this point? We know that the hours left of oxygen that they have is getting very, 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 very close to expiring, if there's a way to say that.
This is an incredibly complex case, and so we're really focused on bringing all those capabilities to bear. As mentioned in the brief, we had a P3 aircraft, Aurora aircraft, flying yesterday that had sonobuoys. The sonobuoys detected noise in the water. We don't know the source of that noise, but we've shared that information with Navy experts to classify it. In the meantime, what we've done is reprioritize the 2 remote operated vehicles that we have searching in the water, and the 1 surface vessel that has sonar capability at the surface of the water in the area of those noises to see if we can locate the source of those noises and locate the people in the submersible.
Well, Admiral, how common is it to pick up noises? Is the ocean a noisy place? Because a regular person hears of these noises and thinks, well, it's got to be
it's
got to be them. It's got to be them.
Yeah.
I mean, how likely is it, in your experience, that this is a human-caused noise?
So this is an incredibly complex site there. You have to remember that it's the wreck site of the Titanic, so there is a lot of metal and different objects in the water around this site. That's why it's so important that we've engaged experts from the Navy that understand the science behind noise and can classify or give us better information about what the source of that noise may be. In the meantime, it's a target, it's a focus for us to look at. And so we've deployed the remote operated vehicles and the surface vessel, the Canadian Coast Guard surface vessel that has sonar capability in the vicinity of that to see if we can detect anything in the water in that area.
Admiral, we have to get going, but just quickly, how long will you hold on to hope for before you start planning for the worst?
So as long as there's a opportunity for survival, we will continue to work with this broad unified command to bring every resource to bear on the search. Over the course of the next 24 hours, we're going to bring additional vessels, additional remote operated vehicles, and we're going to continue to fly in the air. So we'll continue to look.
Well, that was the one of the main people behind the rescue operation. So very interesting to hear exactly what Rear Admiral John Morga had to say from the US Coast Guard. I want to cross live now to Klaas Goren Wetterholm, who's a historian and author of 9 Titanic books, and also known don't you, Klaas, one of the missing men in this submersible, Paul-Henri Najolet, who is also known as PH. And I think you've known him for a number of years, haven't you? You've worked together raising artefacts from the Titanic. So before we go into talking about PH, as he's known, what kind of artefacts did you raise from that ship?
Anything from a button to a bollard, anything weighing a couple of grams to things weighing up to 2 tons, over 2 tons. So that was just anything. China, pieces from the machinery, from whatever, anything.
So just from what you're saying to me and from what I've been reading, PH, Paul-Henri, was obviously very fascinated by the Titanic, and that's one of the reasons, I imagine, why he went down in this submersible. Tell me more about his fascination for that ship.
He was a professional, so he worked with various expeditions. He worked for the IFREMER, the French deep sea research organization. So it's a state-run organization. And so he was very acquainted with the submersible with the Nautil. And I met him first time in '93, so it's over 30 years now. And last time I saw him was in November, when I met him in New York, when we opened our large Titanic exhibition, which was in London previously. And then he came to the exhibition. It was great seeing him, and we sort of just continued where we finished last time we saw each other. He was a great, warm person. He had an incredible knowledge. I'd say that he had the most knowledge in the world about the Titanic wreck. He was the most experienced. He had his knowledge. He had seen the wreck most times, I assume, of everybody diving to the Titanic. He was critical, though, I know that, before going out on the Titan, this new submersible. And I have thought of this as well, because I have a feeling that the submersible doesn't exist any longer.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that they have this large window, much larger than the other submersibles. It's just my own theory now, so it's only that. And I have a feeling water has entered and the whole thing has imploded, because the contact with the mothership was broken abruptly, and then we haven't heard anything. Suddenly now we hear this knocking or whatever it is. But the ocean is large and it could come from anywhere in the ocean. Hopefully it can be from the submersible, but I don't think so.
So you believe that those people in that submersible have passed away already?
Yes, that is my fear, because when I first heard of that this sub had gone missing, I said to myself, oh God, may it not have been PH there, but he was there. I got confirmed yesterday, yes, he was there. But since it was so sudden, since there was no contact with the mothership or anything for a couple of days, it's just my own thought that this has happened. And he himself once said that to me, that if water penetrates the hull, you will die sooner than you ever knew that you were dying. You wouldn't even feel it, because the sub will implode. It was with compressed air, it just explodes, and it happens within a millisecond. They won't have time to feel anything, I'm afraid, if it has happened. And if so, I wonder if anything will ever be found of the sub. Possibly some pieces may float up, or the sub itself, but they have ballast that they could have released and come up because of this. This is how you get up from the bottom. You release ballast, but nothing like this has happened.
Was PH, was he aware of the dangers of diving at that depth?
Absolutely. He knew well what it was about. But I think it was very safe with the French sub, the Nautil, whereas he expressed some critical thoughts about this Titan. You must remember that the other subs, they are state-run subs. One belongs to the American Navy, one belongs to the French deep sea survey organization. And then there is one in Japan. There used to be two in Russia, they're gone. And then there used to be one in Britain. And I don't know if that one is active. To bring out anything there, you can't take a big sub just like that. They can fly out cameras, yes. ROVs, remote operated vehicles, can be taken out there by helicopter, for example. But still, to find the sub in this great ocean where you see nothing, with the headlights you might see 10 meters, but not more. So the visibility is extremely limited. And it took weeks to find the Titanic wreck back in 1985. And it's still a very large object compared to this sub. So I'm trying to be realistic and say to myself that, no, I think it's gone.
Okay, well, Claes Goran Wetterholm, I'm so grateful to you for taking the time to speak to us. I know that it's your friend that we're talking about here down there. So I appreciate this is very difficult for you. So thank you once again for taking the time to speak to us. Thank you.
I know.
Well, let's cross live now to Boston and speak to our correspondent, Jessica Parker, who is there for us. And Jessica, what's the latest from the rescue operation?
Well, we've been hearing from the US Coast Guard following these developments overnight that the sonar technology, these sonar buoys that have been dropped onto the surface of the ocean, have picked up some noises. US media reported it as sounds of banging. The Coast Guard are just describing it as noises that they don't know the source of at the moment. They're also saying there is a lot of metal around the Titanic wreckage site area, but what they're going to do is they're going to pass what they've heard, what they've found, onto experts in the US Navy, and they're redirecting these unmanned robots that are making dives in the area around the site, which is about 900 miles from where we are here on the North American East Coast, and they're going to redirect those robots to make dives in the place where those sounds were heard. So it is a target, a focus of the search, but they really don't know, they say, at the moment, what those sounds are or what significance they might have.
Absolutely, and we know, don't we, just from hearing from experts that the Titanic is just so much metal inside it, around it. Those noises could be produced by anything. And what adds to the difficulty is the fact that the area we're looking at is so immense and so dark and so deep.
Yes, I mean, they've said that the area they're searching is around the size of the US state of Connecticut. And it's not just underwater they're searching, of course, which, as you say, immense depths. So that brings huge complication. But they're also searching on the surface as well. So they've got vessels in the area, these unmanned robots making dives, the sonar technology listening underwater as well. And then they've got aeroplanes that have been deployed from here in the US, from Canada as well. Of course, the vessel that towed the sub to the wreckage site set off from Newfoundland in Canada. And those aeroplanes are scouring the surface of the ocean for any sign that the vessel might have actually managed to re-emerge onto the surface of the ocean. But even then, visibility can obviously be very poor out there. This is a small vessel, about the size of a van. It's white in colour, so it could be quite difficult to spot. But the focus does now seem to be on this area where these sounds have been heard. It's something for the people carrying out the search to try and at least go on and look at and see what might be the source, but a lot of caution, a lot of caveats around that as well.
Absolutely, Jess, thank you very much indeed. And let me just direct you, as I always do, to our webpage. We have a brilliant live page on this story. It's being updated continuously as we speak, both from our correspondents across the world, but also here in London as well. At the moment, we're doing our experts answer your questions. So if you have any questions on this sub and the search for it, you can get in touch by emailing haveyoursay@bbc.co.uk or also by tweeting at @BBC_haveYourSay. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
They were all yellow. I came along. I wrote a song for you. And it was called Yellow. Your skin, oh yeah, your skin and bones turning to something beautiful.
Working together for a more sustainable world tour. DHL and Coldplay.
People are travelling again, heading back out on the road and rediscovering their wanderlust.
Exploring new destinations and cultures, making fresh friends and creating memories that will last a lifetime.
That's why at the Travel Show, we're expanding our horizons too. And wherever we go,
we want you to come with us. Now that might make for an awful lot of excess baggage, but we think you're worth it.
The Travel Show on BBC News.
You're live with me, Marianne Mashiri, on BBC News. President Zelensky has urged those attending an international conference on rebuilding Ukraine to aim for the country's transformation, not just its reconstruction. He said plans needed to include measures to tackle corruption and reform the judiciary to make Ukraine attractive for investment. While political and business leaders are meeting in London to plan for the reconstruction. Diplomatic correspondent James Landale is there, and in an exclusive interview with the President of Estonia, Alar Karis, he asked him why it's important to start rebuilding Ukraine while the fighting continues.
Well, it's important because it's too late when war is start thinking how to rebuild, in what you need and when to get the investment. So that's why it's important. And Estonia started already some time ago, and a couple of weeks ago we opened a completely new kindergarten in Zhytomyr Oblast. So this is something. It's important to start now. It's not in the region where war is going on, but in other regions and also close to Kiev. So, and we are not the only ones. I mean, quite a number of different countries and different businesses and different companies. I also came here with a business delegation, so they make acquaintance with Ukrainian businesses and so forth. So it is important.
But how do you persuade those businesses to invest in Ukraine when there's a risk to their workers from landmines, when there's a risk to their construction because it might be blown up by Russian missiles, and while there's still a concern about corruption in Ukraine?
Of course, corruption is one issue which one has to tackle in Ukraine. And I recently visited Ukraine and Kiev, and I was in anti-corruption office. There are 700 people who are working, 24/7 against corruption in Ukraine. And of course, we are a digital country, and to give this opportunity to make everything digital, more transparent, it also helps to fight with corruption.
So you're convinced that the war has changed Ukraine enough to give enough reassurance on corruption? Because if you talk to business leaders here, they are concerned about it.
Of course you are concerned. That's why we are very much proponent of being Ukraine member of European Union as well as NATO, because we started also and everybody was not happy that we want to become NATO members. But it's an umbrella, and it gives also security to investors that this is a country you can invest.
Do you think the rest of the NATO alliance is moving fast enough to give enough assurances to Ukraine that NATO membership is at least possible, that it's within its grasp? Well, there's a big summit about this next month.
Exactly. I mean, it is possible. It's not possible at this very moment, but we have to give some kind of, it's not only that it's open door policy. We have to give something more to Ukrainians and security guarantees. And at this very moment, we don't see any other alternative as being a NATO member at some point.
Well, that's the Estonian president talking to my colleague James Landale there exclusively not too long ago. Let's bring in now Arisha Lutsevich, who's Deputy Director of the Russia and Eurasia Programme and head of the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House. It's good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about reconstruction and development in Ukraine. Where does reconstruction start? Within Ukraine or from without Ukraine, from foreign intervention?
Well, I will tell you that reconstruction already started in Ukraine, and it started both by the leadership of Ukrainian government and by the initiative of citizens and communities from the grassroots level. We do see, as Ukrainian energy grid was attacked heavily this winter, that Ukraine has managed to restore all of its capacity, and even now talking about the export of electricity. But also, we've run a study of Ukrainian civil society ahead of Ukraine Recovery Conference, and almost 60% of Ukrainian civil society organizations are already rebuilding schools, kindergartens, helping with mental health issues. So recovery is already underway. It's a question of scaling it and making it more effective and more inclusive.
So how does one make it more effective and, more importantly, inclusive as well?
That is a very good question, and I think what we understand as two enablers of this kind of recovery. One is Ukraine's way to full membership of the European Union. Ursula von der Leyen here, the President of the European Commission, was very forceful today, saying Ukraine will be a member of the European Union. We've heard the same from the Foreign Minister of Germany, Foreign Minister of France, and believe me, the whole hall was clapping. It was very well received. That EU accession process will push reform and will also push inclusion, where citizens, trade unions and communities not only be beneficiaries of recovery, but also drafters and designers of that recovery. And the second issue is trust. I think it's important that recovery is trusted by donors, investors who bring with funds, but also Ukrainian citizens who believe that this will be done in the best public good and in the best interest of needs of the people on the ground. And I'm sure that all these partners will work together to ensure it, because there's no right to fail.
Arisha, thank you very much indeed, Arisha, for talking to us there. Arisha Lutsevich there talking about what is needed from that Ukraine conference, which of course is ongoing in London. Before I leave you, Tesla CEO Elon Musk has said the electric car maker will be in India as soon as humanly possible. His comments followed a meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. You can see the two men here. He's on a state visit to the US. The Indian government said it's invited Mr. Musk to explore investment opportunities in electric mobility and the commercial space sector. Mr. Musk says he's trying to figure out the right timing to make that happen. I'm back in just a few minutes' time, so stay with us here on the BBC.
Hello there. Plenty to talk about with the weather story across Europe at the moment. We've seen some extreme heat across Central Europe just recently, particularly in parts of Germany. Munich seeing temperatures as high as 33 degrees. But with this weather front moving through, introducing some rain, some much needed rain across France and Germany, much welcome rain here. It will introduce some cooler conditions, albeit quite briefly. But some of that rain could be quite heavy as well. Now, across the Mediterranean, we've got largely sunny skies and the heat building, as you'd expect now at this time of year. That extends through Italy and over into Iberia. Now, it's been a little bit cooler in Iberia than it should be, but those temperatures are set to climb once again. There's that wetter weather through France, moving its way through Germany. And we're seeing a weather front as well across the northern half of Scandinavia. So the story as we move out of Thursday into Friday, the rain pushes its way steadily east as it bumps into that warmer air, could trigger off some sharp, thundery downpours as it does so. But behind it, we've got more warmth building with a southerly component. So temperatures back in Paris into the high 20s. So let's take a look at that in a little more detail. High 20s, possibly 30 degrees for London. Plenty of sunshine and heat for Madrid and Rome as well. Further east, that frontal system introducing much cooler conditions across Munich, but not for long as the heat returns next week.
Now showing on BBC Real.
Znači, svi su znali za tunel. Ali tunel se nije nigdje smio spominjati. Ranjenici su voženi kroz tunel također i jedini način da vi u stvari dobijete adekvatnu operaciju ukoliko ste teško ranjeni je bio taj da vas odvuku u opkoljeni grad, u bolnicu koja je na liniji fronta i da vas operišu. Sve se to dešavalo na tom malim vratima, znate.
Watch more stories like this at bbc.com/real.
On top of this kind of rubble, rescuers are using their bare hands. You can see them throwing down blocks and trying to search desperately for survivors.
Small arms fire as well as heavy artillery fire, which means that the Russian lines are very close.
This is as close as we've been able to get today to the explosion. It happened inside the police compound just behind me.
This is a bus that's carrying some of the people that were detained following the riot.
These were people's homes. They were newly built. But look at it now. 80% of this village is gone.
We break stories from more places than any other international news broadcaster. We are the leaders in global breaking news.
This programme asks plain questions with the help of the unrivalled range of BBC journalists right across the world. And gathered here in this building, I'll also draw my time reporting on global conflict. Frontline experience that helps me know who to talk to and who to listen to, meaning our analysis is unbiased with absolutely no spin.
Unspun World on BBC News.
This is BBC News. I'm Mariam Mashiri, and these are the latest headlines. The US Coast Guard says noises detected in the search for missing submarine bound for Titanic are now the focus of that search.
The sonar buoys detected noise in the water. We don't know the source of that noise, but we've shared that information with Navy experts to classify it.
President Zelensky admits the counter-offensive against Russia has been slower than desired as world leaders gather in London to discuss the economic future of Ukraine. Controversial influencer Andrew Tate and his brother appear in court in Romania, charged with human trafficking. Now to the occupied West Bank, where Israeli settlers have attacked residents and set fire to olive groves and cars in several Palestinian towns and villages. The attacks are in revenge for the killing of 4 Israelis on Tuesday. Around 100 settlers are reported to have rampaged through the Palestinian town of Huwara. Hundreds of Israeli settlers have also gathered at the West Bank outpost deemed illegal by the Israeli authorities, demanding the government to approve a new settlement there. Well, let's cross live to our Middle East correspondent Tom Bateman. And Tom, bring us up to date on the background to what's been happening.
Well, what we've had today is a day of funerals and further violence in the occupied West Bank. Firstly, as you mentioned, in the last few hours, we're getting more reports of attacks by Israeli settlers in Palestinian villages, in particular a village north of Ramallah in the West Bank, where residents are saying that dozens of cars and homes have been attacked and some torched by Israeli settlers. That followed attacks further north in the West Bank, in and around Huwara, as you said last night. The Palestinian Red Crescent saying a child was beaten there, and also reports of a Palestinian journalist who was hit by rocks thrown through the windscreen of his car. So that part of the violence in the territory has been escalating, and that is since yesterday when 4 Israelis were killed, shot dead by Palestinian gunmen at a gas station just off the main north-south highway in the West Bank by 2 Palestinian gunmen who were killed. The funeral of those 4 Israelis who came from settlements in the West Bank has taken place today. A 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, a man in his 20s and a man in his 60s who were all killed. Before that, on Monday, that event appeared to be in part sparked by a raid into the city of Jenin by the Israeli military, which killed 7 Palestinians, and the 7th died overnight. That was a 15-year-old girl who had her funeral today, carried by fellow students through the streets of Jenin. So we're seeing, casualty rates we haven't seen in a very long time here, and that is all leading in a situation that was already burning in the West Bank to increase fears of further escalation.
And bring us up to date, if you can, on what both sides have been saying, both the Israeli government and Hamas.
Yeah, I mean, those gunmen that attacked the petrol station yesterday, both linked to Hamas, the Islamist Palestinian militant group, which said after the event that it had the capability, it said, to strike anywhere and everywhere. It was raising the rhetoric that had followed that military raid by the Israelis in Jenin on Monday. And I think one of the key drivers on the Israeli side is now what the far-right component of Israel's government is. This is the most hardline nationalist government Israel's had in its history. And very senior ministers are calling for a broad military operation in the West Bank, the likes of which hasn't been seen here in 2 decades, since the height of the second Palestinian Intifada or uprising. That rhetoric is growing. We heard Benjamin Netanyahu. Options, in his words, are open. He's also announced in the last hour or so that further settlement houses will be built for settlers in response to that Palestinian attack. But I think the key thing is watching to see now what happens in terms of military action by the Israelis, because there are growing calls now for further activity, and of course that is extremely concerning to ordinary Palestinians on the ground up and down the West Bank.
Tom Bateman, thank you. Let's return now to our top story. Search teams trying to find the submersible that's missing near the wreck of the Titanic have detected underwater noises. Well, rescue assistance is poured into that area, the search area, from all around the world. But even if the Titan submarine is located, the rescue attempt will still be challenging. For starters, it's extremely difficult to operate at those depths that the submersible could have found itself in. There's total darkness below 1,000 metres, and the wreck of the sub is exploring the depth of that area where the sub is exploring sits at about 3,800 metres, so that's extremely deep. There are remotely operated submarines which are already involved in the search, including the US Navy Curve 21, one of the few vessels that can actually operate at those kinds of depths. It can reach up to 6,000 metres. Well, former Royal Navy submarine commander Ryan Ramsey spoke to the BBC about the challenges of such a rescue mission.
It's not only is it a small 6.7 metre vessel in very, very deep water in a large ocean, but it's also near to the wreckage of the Titanic. And if you think the Titanic was actually over 290 metres long, and that wreckage is all over the place, and there'll be some of that wreckage that's about the same size. So it's exceptionally difficult. It's basically a needle in a haystack. And there are three things that go against this. The first one is collapsing time frame. So they started off with 96 hours of oxygen. Oxygen is not the only thing that they need to worry about, it's carbon dioxide. Secondly, the depth that the vessel, the submersible, might be at, which is down to 3,000 to 4,000 meters, and no rescue has ever been conducted that deep before. And then the final one is, how do you actually rescue it? Because you can't use any of the current capability that is used to rescue from submarines with this particular submersible. I'd like to give hope and say that, you know, this is all going to end well, but the time frame is running out.
Well, Aidan Fitzgerald is a research vessel operations manager at the Marine Institute in Galway. He gave me his thoughts on the underwater noises, those banging sounds that we've detected.
Well, it's certainly, it's a sign of life. So it maybe rules out a catastrophic failure of the hull. So, you know, the fact that somebody can communicate, albeit in a very crude manner, is a sign of life. But obviously the clock has started as well, so it's becoming a race against time now.
What is it that is the main difficulty with getting this sub up to the surface? Because it's one thing finding it, isn't it? It's another thing getting it up. Yeah, well, it's even a challenge to find it. I know they can vector where the location of the sound was from. If they have multiple sonar buoys in the water, they can narrow it down to a certain area. You can get, and I believe they have an ROV down there or going down there. They can use their sonar to search an area, a smallish area. They can't move very quickly, ROVs, probably 2 knots at most, because they're dragging a almost 4 kilometre long umbilical to a mothership along with them. So they have to work their way pretty slowly through we'd say the box that they've narrowed the sound down to. It's only when you get really close then that various imaging things can come in, like video with lighting and stuff like that. So you really almost have to be on top of it to actually categorically identify it. I guess it's not unheard of that you can recover these things. There was an ROV recovered it, or a submersible recovered in 1973 called the Pisces in Irish waters, and that was down at almost 2,000 feet, I believe. And that was recovered using a combination of manned submersibles and an ROV, I think the precursor of the US Navy, that one that's there at the moment. We've recovered objects ourselves at down to about 800 meters, and a lot of subsea construction type vessels would be capable of getting basically a line with a hook on it down to a strop on the submersible. So if the ROV can find it, and the ROV has suitable assets on the surface, I mean, you know, there is hope there that you can attach something to the submersible and recover to the surface with a suitable And of course, Aidan, time is of the essence here, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I know the French vessel Atalante from Ifremer in France is en route with the Victor 6000 ROV, which is a pretty capable scientific ROV. And I think I'm just looking at they're about 100 miles away from the site at the moment. But again, it takes time to get down. It takes a couple of hours to get down to that operating depth. and then you have to begin your search. So, but I guess the more assets they have there, the better. And obviously ROVs can spend as long as they need down. They're not restricted they don't have people in them, so they can spend as long as they want on the bottom and continue their search.
More, of course, on that story, as always, on our website and later in the programme. But for now, let's move on, because the controversial influencer Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan have appeared in court in the Romanian capital, Bucharest. Well, we can cross live now to our news correspondent, Lucy Williamson, who's been following the case. And Lucy, what's happened in court today?
Well, they appeared in court today. It was their first time appearing in front of a judge as the accused in this case. And a really important part of the hearing today was to hand over the indictment to the brothers and their legal team, all 370 pages of it. They're now going to have to sit down, read through it and raise any objections they may have. And this really marks the beginning of the sort of technical preliminary phase of the trial, where the indictment itself is going to be assessed to see if the trial can move forward to those substantial charges that have been laid against the brothers. That may take weeks, it may take months.
So what's the next step then in this case?
Well, as I say, we're waiting for Tate's legal team to come back and see if they have any objections. The judge today is also going to consider whether to keep the brothers under house arrest. They've been under house arrest for 3 months now, almost, and before that in preventative custody for 3 months. So the judge is going to have to consider what is going to happen at the beginning of this trial. Will they stay under house arrest, or will he change those restrictions? And after that, as I say, the trial will begin really with considering the indictment itself, assessing whether the trial can go forward as it stands, and then we'll get to the point where the charges themselves will start to be debated.
Lucy, thank you very much. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
To choose Grana Padano is to embrace its unique Italian values. A moment to be shared. Grana Padano, an Italian feeling.
Stories of success, stories of failure, stories of strength, stories of corruption, stories of hope, stories of despair, stories of optimism, resilience, achievement, triumph. Remarkable stories from different places around the world. Join us for a series of stunning award-winning documentaries. Why Stories on BBC News.
As fighting continues in Ukraine, join our team for the latest developments.
There's now a massive effort to rebuild what's been destroyed, but what happened here will never be forgotten.
See the headlines as they happen with breaking news alerts in the app, and get the full story with bbc.com/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.
You're watching BBC News Now with me, Mariam Mashiri. Police in Honduras say more than 40 people have been killed at a women's prison during a clash between rival gangs.
As a grandmother, I need to know if my daughter is alive or already dead, because I don't know anything. That's all we want. We want justice, and we want them to give us the names of each of our relatives. If that makes them angry, let them be angry, but we want to know about our relatives.
They have no reintegration, no rehabilitation. How is it possible that weapons can enter inside? So there is no doubt that the Institute and the state should be held responsible here.
Well, with me now is Mimi Swaby, a journalist for the BBC World Service. And Mimi, tell us the details of what's happened.
The Honduras President Xiomara Castro has expressed her grief and shock at what she's calling a monstrous murder of 41 individuals at a women's prison during a deadly riot between rival gangs. Now, this is the MS-13 gang and Gang 18. Now, the 900 facility near about 25 kilometres from the capital is a well-known prison, but details are still emerging. There are reports that one of the gangs locked other members, the rival members, in a bathroom cell before setting it alight. Now, 25 individuals burnt to death, 7 others are now in prison suffering from some severe wounds and burns, and others were shot. Now, authorities are warning that the number of victims may still increase, and currently officials are trying to identify the bodies, which is proving a slower process than you would hope, with, as we saw earlier, some family members just desperate to know who the individuals are, who the victims are, so they know if their loved ones are one of them.
Mimi, do we know why this has happened? What the reasons are behind this?
It's thought that it could be a retaliation against the government efforts to really clamp down on a gang culture in the country, but also corruption within these penal facilities. Now, the president actually said that the planning of this riot by gang members was known by the guards in the prison, and that actually some officials were involved, they were complicit. One of her first actions was to replace the security minister and also enforce a really strict state of emergency. Now, this basically means that there is a security plan now in force in 26 prisons around the country, including this facility. So that is about 20,000 individuals within those prisons. And more details and more measures are going to be, or expected to be, reported later today.
And we had, as you saw yourself, Mimi, angry relatives, and they just want answers, don't they? Understandably.
Exactly, Miriam. All they want answers. They just want to know who these individuals are. There's some really harrowing videos and photos across social media, but people are also really angry. This could have been stopped. This was warned against repeatedly by authorities, by communities, that why would you put two rival gangs, extremely deadly rival gangs, in a compound in such close proximity without the necessary and the needed security measures in place to ensure that no violence or casualties were going to be found, like in this incident. So people are also really sad, but there is a lot of anger within the communities.
OK, Mimi Swaby, good to talk to you. Thank you for that update. Now, a bit of a gear change, because thousands of music fans are arriving at Glastonbury for this year's festival. A number of bands are going to be performing, including Arctic Monkeys, Guns N' Roses and Sir Elton John, who are all among the headline acts. The actual music doesn't start until Friday, but that doesn't stop the die-hard fans pitching their tents on the very famous site in the southwest of England. And we can cross live now to there and to our correspondent Andy Howard, who is at Glastonbury. And Andy, I can see the pyramid stage behind you. It's all very empty now, but that's not going to be the case, is it? Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And the weather, thank goodness for all those muddy boots, is looking very dry.
Well, you say that, because in the last hour and a bit we've had a torrential downpour here. Now it's baking hot. We don't really know what to do with ourselves weather-wise, and that weather this morning has made the first trek across this site for thousands and thousands of people a little bit more tricky than they would have hoped. A little bit slippy, a little bit slidey. The gates opened at 8 a.m. this morning, and just to paint the picture for you, from 9 o'clock last night they began to queue and queue and queue, and there were rows of tents outside in the car park waiting for Emily Evis to arrive at 8 a.m. to open up the main gates. She did that. It's actually the first year that Emily Evis has gone solo on that and opened the gates on her own. Her father, Michael, who of course is the founder of Glastonbury, well into his 80s now, he was in the Land Rover watching on, but Emily opened the doors, and did they flood in? Wow, organised chaos for hours out there, and it was just as it was getting a bit damp, so they were slipping and sliding up the hill into Glastonbury. We had broken trolleys, there were tales of cider being spilt everywhere. It is before they even get into the festival proper, but there are thousands here now. I don't know whether we want to spin around and just show you the pyramid field as it is now. You can see across there that they are starting to come in, and you can see at the top of your shot there that the tents at the very back of the pyramid field, that looks full now. And a lot of the people that I was talking to in the queue this morning were saying that was the reason they were in the queue. They had to get those precious spots where you can pretty much watch the music from your tent.
Wow.
Here is the pyramid stage, as you say. You can see the new green peace sign for this year as well, glimmering in the sunshine. So all is set.
I was going to say to you, actually, Andy, about the tents. One of the reasons why people like to be so high up is because obviously as it rains, you get all of that rainwater flooding downwards. I know, because I've been there. I've been to Glastonbury, Andy. I've lost my Wellington boot in the mud in Glastonbury, and I hope that doesn't happen to anyone, because it isn't fun, I can tell you.
No, and there's a definite sliding scale of wet at Glastonbury. When it's very, very, very wet,
yes,
you're kind of okay because your wellies will keep you wet. It's that sticky phase, isn't it, between it being wet and dry, when you don't know whether the next step will be your last before you either go over on your face or you lose your welly. But none of that yet. I mean, have a look at the ground here. That's not bad. I mean, it's a little bit of giving it, but we're all right. I mean,
I like your shoes, Andy. You're wearing very sensible shoes, which is great.
Yeah, well, I'm told by my family that they are my dad's shoes, and they've got to be sensible, hard-wearing, but also with an air of being smart.
Can I give you some advice, Andy? Can you go, if you're going to use the toilet, go now, because they become pretty hideous by the end of the weekend.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you very much. Would you like some dangerous telly? Should we have a quick chat to some of the early festival goers?
Go for it. Go for it. Grab a couple. Look, there's some guys behind you. Go.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
They've
this could be my last interview, but let's give it a go. Guys, we're live on the BBC News channel. Welcome to Glastonbury 2023.
Thank you.
Where have you come from?
London.
London. How long did it take you to get here? Tell me about your journey.
A few hours, was it?
A few hours we drove.
Couple of 3 hours. We were early doors.
Yeah.
Jamie's off. Come back. Don't be shy, Jamie. Come back.
So you left this morning?
Yes.
That's not bad going, you know.
No, we did quite well.
And where have you managed to get the tent?
Hospitality.
Hospitality. You know, if I was going to pick 5 at random, I've picked the 5 in hospitality. You can see they've got clean trainers. There's not a speck on them. There's no sweat on these people.
Can they give us a big wave? Can they give us a big wave, Andy? Get them to give us a big wave.
Can you all give us a big wave to the camera for the news channel? There we go.
Amazing. That's amazing. Andy, thank you so much for that. Andy, I'm going to say goodbye to you and everyone at Glastonbury. Had a wonderful time. The music looks like it's going to be amazing. The BBC will be covering it, of course. That's it from me. Back in a few minutes.